What do we do about this guy? The latest revelations. I mean, first this started in April, right, with ProPublica discovering that Clarence Thomas had received over the last nearly 30 years, since 1994, millions of dollars worth of, or what appears to be millions of dollars worth of vacations and remodeling and buying and remodeling his mother's home and letting her live in it rent-free and putting the kid that he and Ginni were raising through high-end prep schools at, covering the tuition. That Harlan Crow, the son of Trammell Crow, the famous real estate developer, and now the billionaire, CEO and or whatever his position is with all these different Crow holdings and Crow Industrial and Crow this and Crow that, that he had, it appears that he basically bought a Supreme Court justice and has owned him for the better part of 30 years. And then Lever News, and I pointed this out to you, I believe, yesterday, Lever News just published an in-depth report about how Crow's companies are substantially, financially benefiting from Clarence Thomas's tie-breaking votes. The most recent, and I think one of the more egregious cases, was this case involving the Clean Water Act, where Clarence Thomas was the tie-breaking vote. Brett Kavanaugh even voted against this decision. But Clarence Thomas was the tie-breaking vote that ended federal protection of about half the wetlands in America at the same time that one of the Crow companies was trying to build a huge, apparently, warehouse complex of some sort in Georgia, and was being held up because there was a wetland on there. Well, that's not going to be an issue anymore, apparently. So what do we do here? Well, there's really two options. One is for there to be an investigation of corruption by the Justice Department of Clarence Thomas. That's not going to happen. And the other, especially with Merrick Garland. And the other is to impeach him, and that's not going to happen. Impeachment has to originate in the House of Representatives, which is owned by the Republicans right now, and no Supreme Court justice has ever been successfully removed from office. Samuel Chase in 1805 was impeached by the House, but the Senate failed to convict him. But there is a lesson in the 1970s, and that was the lesson that Richard Nixon taught us. When Nixon became president, the most liberal member of the Supreme Court was a guy named Abe Fortas. And Fortas's wife worked at a high-powered law firm in Washington, D.C., and there had been this claim back in 1968 when Lyndon Johnson wanted to make Abe Fortas the Chief Justice. Earl Warren announced in '68 that he was going to retire. And LBJ wanted to make Abe Fortas the Chief Justice, and this claim came out that Fortas's wife was somehow involved in some illegal or criminal tax scheme, and the proof of it was in the safe in her office. They actually looked into this in '68 and found that there was no merit. It was just a complete BS charge. But now Richard Nixon, a couple of years later, Richard Nixon was president, and so he had John Mitchell convene a grand jury to investigate Abe Fortas's wife. At which point, now, keep in mind, this was complete BS. There was no there, but still, the old saying, a grand jury can indict a ham sandwich. Fortas, in order to stop John Mitchell from dragging his wife through the mud, resigned from the Supreme Court. Now, Ginni Thomas, in my opinion, has, some significant issues that are worthy of investigation by a grand jury, shall we say. Number one is her involvement in the fake electors scheme. This is a clear, in my opinion, the whole fake electors scheme is a clear criminal fraud against the United States. In addition to being seditious and all those other things, faking government forms is a crime itself. And, I'm expecting to see some significant prosecutions around this coming out of Jack Smith. We'll see, where it all goes. But, this is an issue because Ginni Thomas sent letters, email letters, to a majority of the Republican legislators in the state of Arizona, asking them to, essentially asking them to watch a YouTube video, but the call for action of the YouTube video is apparently to participate in the fake elector scheme. She also sent similar notes to members of state legislatures, state legislature in Wisconsin. Then there's also her involvement with the January 6th rally. Now, she left, or at least she asserts that she left before any violence began, and she asserts that she was not one of the organizers, but one of the people in the middle of the whole thing who worked for the group that had the permit for the ellipse, said that she was, that Ginni Thomas was the person who basically negotiated among the various warring factions to bring them together and make the January 6th rally happen. And that has never been seriously investigated. So I'm saying that, Merrick Garland needs to convene a grand jury. Now, I get it. Merrick Garland is so timid and so afraid of doing anything that might be perceived as political that for 2 years he ignored the blatant criminality of Donald Trump until finally the January 6th committee shamed him into appointing Jack Smith. Well, this summer it looks like Jack Smith is going to nail Donald Trump and probably a couple dozen other people. My prediction is going to be that when Jack Smith finally issues indictments, it's not just going to be Donald Trump. It's going to be 10, 15, 20, 25, 30 people. It's going to be a bunch of people that he's going to be going after. I mean, we'll see. I may be wrong, but that's how Robert Mueller did it. You'll recall Robert Mueller indicted some 30 some odd people, 37 people, as I recall. In the majority of them, I think 27 of them were in Russia. But he actually got convictions. I mean, out of the Mueller investigation came the conviction of Trump's first campaign manager, Paul Manafort. So anyhow, bottom line is, I think that this would be a way to, number one, show not just Clarence Thomas, but the other members of the court who are living high on the hog right now. Justice Roberts, his wife making $10 million, hustling lawyers into law firms to argue before the court, and who paid off Brett Kavanaugh's, gambling debts and stuff like that. What's going on with Sam Alito and his luxury trips to Europe. There's just a bunch of questions here that are worthy of investigation, but start with Ginni Thomas, in my opinion. So number one, it tells them, corruption is something that will not stand. Number two, it has could shed some light on the ability to shed some light on actually what happened behind the scenes in the organizing for January 6th, if it turns out that Ginni Thomas wasn't directly involved with that. And third, it might provoke Clarence Thomas to do like Abe Fortas did and say, this is just not worth the trouble. He's in his 70s. He's a wealthy man now, and no doubt in part thanks to Mr. Crow. And, it's time to pack it in, Clarence. So, we'll see where that goes. But I am actually hopeful about this. And that's the piece that I wrote today over at HartmannReport.com. It's titled Time to Investigate Ginni Thomas. It's also posted over on Daily Kos. So there's that. Two other stories that I wanted to share with you very quickly that I think are just absurd. The shameless greed of Big Pharma. This is just incredible. Merck on Tuesday became the first pharmaceutical company to sue the Biden administration over Medicare being able to negotiate prices. Now, they only gave Medicare the ability to negotiate prices in the Inflation Reduction Act on, I believe, 20 different drugs, or maybe it was only 10. It was a small number of drugs, a very small number of drugs. But even that is making the pharmaceutical companies go crazy. They filed a lawsuit against HHS and CMS saying, and this is from Merck's lawsuit, that the negotiations, quote, make a mockery of the First Amendment by conscripting companies to legitimize government extortion. And they're asking the court to, quote, declare that the program affects compensable takings under the Fifth Amendment and enjoin its compelled agreements under the First Amendment. Patty Murray, the Democratic senator from Washington State, says Merck is doing everything it can to protect its profits at the expense of patients who need their prescriptions to stay healthy and get treatment for everything from cancer to diabetes. Yeah, very true. On top of that, now we've got the healthcare system. The CEOs of the seven largest health insurance companies took $335 million in compensation last year. That's just mind-boggling. One guy took $181 million, the CEO of Molina Healthcare, and all of their money comes from taxes. These guys, it's a gravy train for these guys.